very good to have you with us. This is ARIRANG News, live from our studio in Seoul. I'm Laah Hyun-kyung. At the National Assembly, the two-day confirmation hearing for Prime Minister nominee Lee Wan-koo began this morning. Some political analysts say his fate is unclear as he is facing many allegations, the biggest among them being his attempt to manipulate the media. Our National Assembly correspondent Park Geunhye, who's following the story, files this report.
The two-day confirmation hearing for Prime Minister nominee Lee Wan-koo got underway at the National Assembly on Tuesday. Lee, the ruling Saenuri Party floor leader up until late last month, began by expressing his regret over a series of allegations against him that have piled up in recent weeks.
As I was preparing for this confirmation hearing, I was once again reminded of how small and problematic I was. I bitterly regret my deficiencies.
The 65-year-old three-term lawmaker is facing a tough road ahead as the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy Party has urged him to withdraw himself from consideration. That's a turnaround from when the nomination was announced, as it was hailed at first by both parties. The amicable atmosphere changed amid allegations surrounding his past. These range from accusations of real estate speculation to doubts about whether he and his son properly fulfilled their mandatory military service, and a public outcry against his attempts to wield his influence over reporters, behavior that he has since acknowledged as improper. The hearing ends Wednesday and lawmakers will vote on his nomination on Thursday. Park Geunhye, ARIRANG News.
Meanwhile, President Park Geunhye and the ruling party leadership have agreed to form a bi-weekly consultative body between the presidential office, the government, and the ruling party. The party's policy chiefs at the meeting, which will likely start later this month, aims to bolster cooperation in carrying out policies. The president has been heavily criticized, even by some in the ruling party, for her lack of communication skills when running the country. President Park, who has rejected suggestions to consider raising taxes to cover welfare programs yesterday, said today that what's more important right now is to revitalize the economy. She also denied having said that she would expand welfare without a tax hike. And there are still many eyes on the actions of the newly elected opposition party chairman Moon Jae-in. Recent polls show his ratings have gone up since his election, but some critics say his new style is not genuine and is just a ploy to win more votes. Our Kwon So-ah reports.
A latest public opinion poll shows the main opposition party's newly elected chairman Moon Jae-in is becoming more popular in the public's eyes. According to Real Meter's latest survey, more than 22% of respondents see Moon as a potential presidential candidate in 2017. That's almost 10 percentage points higher than current Seoul Mayor Park Won-soon. In a separate survey, the New Politics Alliance for Democracy's new leader had more popular support than UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, who has been mused as a potential candidate since last year. The pollster says Monday's unprecedented visit to the graves of former right-wing presidents Lee Seung-man and Park Geunhye by the left-wing leader was viewed in a positive light by around 60% of ruling party and main opposition party supporters. But Moon has received criticism for not persuading the new Supreme Council members to do the same. Analysts say Moon has adapted his political views since his defeat to President Park Geunhye in the 2012 presidential election, saying his decision to pay respects to the former authoritarian leaders reflected his will to bring about national unity as well as strong national security. Moon said that when it comes to those matters, it is not about which party is right or wrong. But others have expressed skepticism, saying they need to see he truly believes in what he is saying and doing. Critics evaluate Moon's change in actions as a mere tactic to garner more supporters, especially as his party is riddled with deep-rooted factionalism. Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
Russia says Kim Jong-un's planned visit to Moscow in May will not affect relations between Russia and China. Kim is expected to travel to Russia for an event marking the 70th anniversary of the Soviet Union's victory over Nazi Germany in World War II. Now, responding to seeming concerns that Beijing might be unhappy about Kim visiting Russia before China, the Russian ambassador to China reportedly said Kim's attendance is natural and logical, as Korea also fought for liberation against Japan in World War II. The ambassador stressed that as of now, the most pressing issue concerning the Korean peninsula is resuming the stalled six-party nuclear disarmament talks, and in that sense, Moscow and Beijing share the view that the dialogue needs to be resumed as soon as possible. In the meantime, officials and researchers from Korea and the U.S. will gather in Washington next Tuesday to mark the first anniversary of the UN Commission of Inquiry's landmark report on North Korea's human rights record. They are expected to discuss Pyongyang's human rights violations and its future as well. The event is garnering a lot of attention because it comes at a time when North Korea is demanding its human rights records be expunged following a defector's recent confession that parts of his story about his life in a prison camp were falsified. Now, despite the confession, key officials who will be at next week's meeting, including then-chair of the UNCOI, Michael Kirby, emphasized that it does not change the fact that the regime is committing human rights violations. U.S. President Barack Obama has made it clear that he is holding out hope for a diplomatic solution to the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. He says he will wait for the outcome of an upcoming round of four-way talks set to take place in Belarus on Wednesday. Our Kim Hyun-bin has this report.
U.S. President Barack Obama says there has been no decision yet on whether to send arms to Ukraine. He said he will wait for the outcome of Wednesday's talks in Belarus between the leaders of Ukraine, Russia, France, and Germany before deciding on whether to send lethal arms to Kiev to help the Ukrainians fight pro-Russian separatists in the east of their country. Wrapping up talks with German Chancellor Angela Merkel at the White House on Monday, Obama stressed that diplomacy and sanctions remain the top priority for resolving the crisis.
If, in fact, diplomacy fails, what I've asked my team to do is to look at all options. What other means can we put in place to change Mr. Putin's calculus? And the possibility of lethal defensive weapons is one of those options that's being examined. But I have not made a decision about that yet.
Obama made clear that he could put more pressure on Ukraine by providing arms. However, that could endanger Washington's unity with Europe on the issue. The German leader, who is opposed to sending weapons to Ukraine, urged Obama to think very carefully about his next move.
We continue to pursue a diplomatic solution, although we have suffered a lot of setbacks. These days, we will see whether all sides are ready and willing to come to a negotiated settlement.
The decision on supplying arms to Kiev has been postponed temporarily as Merkel and French President François Hollande are working to find a diplomatic solution. The two are due to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko in Belarus on Wednesday, in what some experts say could be the last realistic attempt to resolve the crisis diplomatically. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
And as you just saw there, Korea's tax revenue fell short of its planned target for the third straight year in 2014 as the country grappled with a prolonged economic slowdown. It was also the largest number on record. Our Hwang Ji-hye has the details.
Korea's tax revenue fell short of the government's target by a record amount last year. This also marks 3 straight years of a shortfall.
The finance ministry says tax revenue came in at around 205 trillion won, or roughly $190 billion in 2014, around 10 billion shy of the goal. Last year's shortfall is even larger than the amount recorded at the height of the Asian financial crisis in 1998 of 7.8 billion. The ministry attributes the shortfall to sluggish corporate tax revenue stemming from companies' weak performances. Corporate taxes for 2014 reached around $39 billion, $3 billion less than the government's target. It also says slumping domestic demand and a strengthening Korean won against the greenback prompted a fall in value-added taxes and customs duties. The government managed, however, to collect more taxes on wages than its target by $450 million. The ministry explained that the rise in the number of employed resulted in more income tax revenue. For 2015, the ministry is targeting tax revenue that's up around 2% from last year's target. It adds that it will push through structural reforms and economy revitalization plans this year to meet the goal, but experts are skeptical about that as the economy at home and abroad remains sluggish. Hwang Jie, ARIRANG News.
Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan meets with his global counterparts at the G20 Finance Ministers and Central Bank Governors meeting in Istanbul. Now, ahead of that event, he told a foreign media outlet that Korea needs to focus more on reforming its economic structure rather than on revising interest rates. For this report, here's our Shin Se-min.
Korea's finance minister Choi Kyung-hwan says the country's interest rate policy will be locked in for some time as the domestic economy is showing a steady recovery and inflation will remain balanced. Speaking with Reuters ahead of the two-day G20 finance ministers meeting in Istanbul, the finance minister said economic reform is more important for the Korean economy than an interest rate adjustment.
The major issue that we should solve for our economy is reforming its structure rather than cutting or raising interest rates.
He said the Korean government has identified labor, education, and the financial and public sectors as the major areas for reforms so that the nation can avoid falling into a drawn-out period of sluggish growth. The finance minister also pointed out the nation's key interest rate is already at a historic low of 2%, unchanged for a third straight month.
This year's challenge will be risky as the global economy may not be recovering as fast as we expected. Low oil prices are absolutely good news for the Korean economy, but it also has various risk factors at the same time. There will be another challenge that we could face this year.
On the global economic front, Che said the European Central Bank's recent monetary policy could benefit the export-reliant Korean economy as it could drive demand there for exports from Asian countries. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
Korea's IT and communications sector enjoyed another strong month in January, with exports jumping 6% from the same month last year on the back of solid memory chip orders. Korea's trade ministry says the country's ICT exports amounted to $14 billion last month, while the key sector managed to keep its trade balance in the black. Imports rose at a faster rate of 14% on-year in January. Now, handset exports continued to fall amid intensified competition from Apple and Chinese manufacturers. Handset imports, on the other hand, soared more than 55%, mostly on rising demand on Apple's new iPhone 6 models. The global steel market has been suffering a supply glut, mostly due to a steady stream of shipments from China. And with China's steel exports hitting a new high in January, Korean companies' woes are expected to continue this year as well. Kim Min-ji reports.
Steelmakers in Korea are in for a tough year, especially with growing shipments from China in a market already suffering from an oversupply. China, the world's largest steelmaker, exported 10.3 million tons of steel products in January, up more than 50% from a year ago. The gain comes despite a new tax rule in China that was expected to curb the country's steel shipments this year. China ditched a tax rebate of 9 to 13% on steel products that contain boron, a chemical added to steel products to increase quality. Many Chinese steelmakers had taken advantage of the tax rebate system, enjoying a return equivalent to roughly $30 to $40 for every ton of steel exported. But with no signs of the supply glut dwindling, analysts in Korea say the country's steelmakers have a rough year ahead of them.
Chinese steelmakers have turned to other chemical products that are still subject to tax rebate. And due to China's oversupply of steel products, exports will remain robust. Falling prices will also add to Korean steelmakers' woes.
Experts say Korean companies need to focus on lowering their prices in order to gain a stronger foothold in the market. Korea shipped just under 370,000 tons of steel to China last month, down more than 8% from a year ago. In the same period, Korea's imports of Chinese steel rose about 1%. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
Meanwhile, Chinese tourists are visiting Korea in ever larger numbers, especially during the holiday season. The Korea Tourism Organization projects some 126,000 Chinese tourists will visit the country during the week-long Chinese Spring Festival that starts next Wednesday. Now, this would be a 30% increase compared to last year. For the whole of last year, more than 6 million Chinese tourists visited Korea, making up well over 40% of the total number of foreign visitors. The Culture Ministry says it's preparing to release more leaflets and storybooks about Korea and the Chinese language, as well as some shopping promotion guidebooks. With the demanding academic and working schedules of many Koreans, getting a decent night's sleep has become a difficult task. For an increasing number of people, it's gotten to the point where they are turning to sleep clinics for help. Our Kim Ji-yeon has this story.
Hunched shoulders, dark circles under droopy eyelids, excessive yawning. These are telltale signs of sleep deprivation, a common condition among Koreans. The national sleep average is less than 8 hours, the lowest among OECD member countries. So what's keeping them up at night?
I sleep for 3 to 4 hours a day during the academic semester. I feel dizzy all day, so I try to get fresh air from time to time and try to sleep while commuting.
These days, I sleep like 5 hours because of night culture in Korea. My company has a lot of meetings and conferences, and after that we go drinking. And so it's really hard to go sleep.
If aroma candles and counting sheep don't work, what can one do to get a good night's rest? Specialized medical centers have popped up in recent years to help, like this clinic in downtown Seoul. Quality shut-eye is important for the brain, says the clinic's doctor. While we're sleeping, the brain helps the body dump out waste, making way for a fresh start the following morning.
Sleep deprivation is truly detrimental to the body. The immune system will start to fail, inducing all sorts of diseases, including arrhythmia, diabetes, and stroke. It's important to ask for help and receive treatment, particularly for those suffering from insomnia for more than 3 months.
Physical and psychological methods are often used to help insomnia patients. Those suffering from sleep apnea may get help from a surgical procedure. For others, a 5 to 8 week program to change cognitive and behavioral patterns could be the ticket to reclaiming those precious sleep hours. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
Bringing you the fresh updates from stories breaking in Korea and abroad. We give you a bigger and better picture of the world. Join Laah Hyun-kyung live from Seoul. Every weekday, only on ARIRANG.
We have a new ranking of global cities. This one ranks cities by sustainability, and Frankfurt has come out on top. This is the latest index by design consultancy firm Arcadis, which lists Seoul as the most sustainable city in Asia. Globally, the Korean capital ranked 7th ahead of Hong Kong and Singapore. Now, the index ranks 50 leading world cities and grades them on their environmental progress, viability as a place to live, and their financial stability. Frankfurt was recognized for its green areas and numerous parks and rivers. There are now fewer than 3 years remaining until the 2018 Winter Olympics kick off in Korea's resort town of Pyeongchang. The question now is how much of the prep work has been completed and what still needs to be done. Connie Lee has this story.
For those of you counting down, the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics is just about 3 years away. Come February 9th, 2018, the high-profile competition will kick off in Gangwon-do province, with top athletes aiming for gold. While it still seems a long way off, in actuality, the clock is ticking for Korea, as it must complete all preparations 1 year before the Games open. With budget and environmental issues looming, the question is whether Korea will be ready in time. So far, only around 10% of work has been done on the 6 new facilities being built for the Olympics. And the funds received from sponsors to bankroll construction only make up 15% of the goal of about $730 million needed. Meanwhile, the citizens of Gangwon-do are up in arms about money being wasted, especially the combined $219 million being used on the speed skating rink and an ice hockey rink, which will be dismantled after the 17-day event. As for facilities that are set to be used afterwards, like the 12,000-seater figure skating rink, with no concrete plans for how the venue will be put to use, local residents aren't exactly excited about adding another rink to the 5 they already have. Pyeongchang officials say Korea will be ready in time, but hopes linger that more practical plans will be implemented soon enough. Connie Lee, ARIRANG News.
The Unconventional Art Seonje Center in Seoul is hosting 2 experimental exhibitions this month and next. One tells a tale about a museum in order to change how we think about art spaces, and the other brings together artists and curators from 4 nations for a united approach to art here in Asia. Our In Myun-hee takes us through them.
Sometimes you have to look outside of the box, and you'll find art where you're least expecting it. The Art Seonje Center is one of Korea's leaders in current and experimental contemporary art. Their most recent experiment includes the rather unconventional. Here, smoking is not a pastime, but is instead part of the art. This piece by world-recognized artist Hee-man Chung takes the art experience to a whole new level.
Like reading a story changes your idea of reality, and in the way, by smoking inside the museum, it changes your relationship with the museum.
Also at the Art Seonje Center on joint display is Discordant Harmony. The exhibition is in collaboration with the Goethe Institute and brings together 12 artists from 4 different countries: Korea, China, Taiwan, and Japan. These global artists aim to look at the relationships between countries in Asia, examined through art. Im Yoon-hee, ARIRANG News.
Welcome everyone, I'm Michelle Park here with the latest weather forecast. The cool spell has broken today, putting the numbers back to normal. Now you may have noticed the difference this morning because the approximately temperatures was about 10 degrees higher than yesterday morning. Now the afternoon is also expected to be milder all across the nation, with the highs in some regions down south ranging into the teens, so it looks like warmer Tuesday is ahead. Now above the peninsula, it looks pretty clear, though here in the central region, it's going to be a bit gloomy because of the clouds and smog. Now also there is chances that we'll have high levels of fine dust across the country, so make sure to stay updated if you're heading outside today. Now also, we've had dry weather alert in place since yesterday, and it would have been nice to see it has lifted as well, but unfortunately it has expanded, so watch out for any fire starters. Now let's have a look at the reading for today. So we'll peak up to 6 this afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Gwangju and Busan will be higher at 9 and 10 degrees. Now moving over to other regions, Jeju peaks up to 9, Dokdo hits down to 6, while Mount Gyeongang is light clouded with -4 degrees. That's all for now, Michelle Park, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
And that does it for this edition of our newscast. From me and the rest of the team in Seoul, thank you very much for staying with us. We'll be back with more updates at 6 p.m. Korea time.